Harper's text arrived at 9:17 a.m. Hey Elena, we're keeping the ceremony really intimate. Just immediate family. I hope you understand. No hard feelings. I stared at the message, rereading it slowly, the way you do when your brain refuses to accept what your eyes are seeing. Immediate family. The words sat there, polite and clean, wrapped in emojis and fake warmth. And yet, somehow, I wasn't included. I didn't reply right away. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and let the silence of my apartment fill the space where a response should have been. Outside, Portland was gray and quiet, rain tapping softly against the window like it always did. Inside, something had just shifted, subtle but unmistakable. The kind of shift you don't hear, but you feel deep in your chest. I didn't know it yet, but that text message was the first crack. I'm Elena Brooks. I'm 31 years old. I design structural systems for commercial buildings. My job is to anticipate failure before it happens, to look at clean, confident surfaces and calculate the stress hidden underneath. I trust numbers. I trust evidence. I trust things that can be proven. Family has never been one of those things. My father died 3 years ago. He was the only constant in my life, the one person who never treated me like an inconvenience. He was practical to the core, an engineer who believed that if something mattered, you protected it properly. Before he passed, he left me two things that defined my sense of safety in this world: a tightly protected personal trust fund and a weather-beaten house on the coast at Cape Alder. We rebuilt that house together when I was younger, board by board, weekend after weekend. No shortcuts, no pretending. After he was gone, everything else slowly unraveled. Harper is my half-sister, same father, different worlds. She grew up polished, curated, effortlessly adored. Her mother, Marjorie Lane, entered my father's life late and rearranged it quickly. They called it blending a family. What it really meant was that I became background noise. Still, when the wedding announcement arrived, I didn't expect to be erased. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, expensive. The kind of paper that announces importance before you even open it. Inside was a detailed schedule for a full weekend celebration. Welcome cocktails, rehearsal dinner, ceremony, after-party, brunch, pages of names, friends from Harper's college years, distant relatives I barely remembered, people I'd never met. My name wasn't there. I checked again. Slowly, methodically. This wasn't an oversight, it was intentional. I was still processing that when my phone buzzed again. Not a message this time, a bank alert. Trust account notification, wire transfer processed. I felt my stomach drop as I opened it. The amount was large, 5 figures. The memo line was short and devastatingly clear. Wedding expenses. I stood perfectly still in the middle of my kitchen, the air suddenly too thin. I hadn't authorized any transfers. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed to contribute a single dollar. And yet, my trust, my father's safeguard, the thing he designed specifically so no one could touch it, had just been accessed. The contrast was impossible to ignore. I wasn't family enough to attend the wedding, but I was family enough to pay for it. That was the moment suspicion hardened into certainty. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. Panic clouds judgment, and tears don't leave a paper trail. Instead, I did what I've always done when something feels structurally wrong. I slowed down. I documented everything: screenshots, timestamps, account numbers. I pulled up my calendar, my work logs, my recent travel history. This wasn't just hurt feelings. This was a breach. I looked again at Harper's text message, the careful wording, the soft dismissal, and suddenly, it all felt rehearsed. Like a distraction. Like they'd already decided I wouldn't push back. They thought I'd stay quiet. They were wrong. I didn't know how far it would go yet. I didn't know how ugly it would become. All I knew, standing there with my phone buzzing in my hand, was this. Someone had crossed a line my father spent his life making sure no one ever could. And foundations don't forgive that kind of mistake. I didn't call my family first. I called the trust company. When something feels wrong, you don't ask the people who benefit from it to explain themselves. You go straight to the paper trail. The woman on the phone sounded calm, professional, almost bored. She used my last name easily, the way people do when they assume everything is in order. There was a limited authorization form submitted last month, she said. Everything was properly notarized. I asked her to email it to me. The document arrived less than a minute later. 3 pages. Dense legal language. Official formatting. a clean notary stamp at the bottom, and my name typed neatly beneath a signature that was supposed to be mine. I stared at it longer than I expected to. At first glance, it looked convincing. The slope of the letters was right. The spacing was familiar. Whoever signed it had studied my handwriting, carefully. But then my training kicked in. I design structures for a living. I know what real pressure looks like. I know when something is bearing weight naturally and when it's being forced. This signature was wrong. The pen pressure was too even, too cautious. Real signatures are fluid. They rush in places. They hesitate in others. This one didn't breathe. The lines were drawn, not written, copied slowly, stroke by stroke. My name wasn't signed. It was traced. I scrolled down to the date. My chest tightened. The authorization was supposedly signed on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of a site inspection I'd been leading in Tacoma, Washington. I didn't need to check my calendar to know that. I remembered the cold wind off the water. I remembered standing on exposed concrete, wearing a hard hat, pointing out stress fractures to a contractor who didn't want to hear bad news. Still, I checked. There it was. Time-stamped photos, location data, security badge logs, half a dozen people who could confirm I never left the site that day. I wasn't in an office signing paperwork. I was on a construction deck, miles away. That's when the shock wore off, and clarity set in. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't send an angry text. I called Marjorie. She answered on the second ring. "Elena," she said warmly, "I was just thinking about you." Of course she was. I didn't accuse her, not yet. I described the document. I asked calmly how my signature ended up on a form I had never seen. There was a pause, not a long one, just long enough. "Oh, that," she said lightly. "It was just a formality. Wedding planning is chaotic. Things move fast." A formality. My name, my money, my future. "You signed it for me," I said. She laughed softly, like I was being dramatic. "Don't be like that. It was a temporary family contribution. Everything will be reimbursed after the honeymoon." Contribution. That word landed harder than any accusation could have. She hadn't said mistake. She hadn't said misunderstanding. She said contribution, as if my trust fund was a shared wallet sitting on the kitchen counter. As if boundaries were optional. As if my father's intentions didn't matter anymore because he wasn't here to enforce them. "You didn't ask," I said. "We didn't think you'd mind," she replied smoothly. "You're always so independent, so practical." There it was. The justification. If I didn't object loudly enough, then consent could be assumed. I ended the call without saying goodbye. I sat there for a long time afterward, the document open on my laptop, my reflection faintly visible in the dark screen. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't angry yet. I was calculating. This wasn't panic-driven behavior. It wasn't desperation. It was strategic. Someone had looked at my silence and mistaken it for weakness. Someone believed they could drain my trust quietly, one wire transfer at a time, and I would accept it to avoid conflict. They were wrong. If I did nothing, the money would keep disappearing. If I stayed quiet, the story would solidify without me in it. I wouldn't just lose control of my finances. I'd lose the last thing my father built to protect me. That forged signature wasn't just theft. It was a message. And now that I'd read it clearly, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. I didn't walk into Robert Hayes' office looking for comfort. I walked in looking for leverage. Robert had handled my father's estate for over a decade. His office in Seattle was quiet in the way only old legal buildings are. Thick walls, heavy wood, the faint smell of paper that's been handled by people who understand consequences. Nina Caldwell was already there when I arrived, her laptop open, legal pads stacked neatly beside her. She didn't smile. That told me everything. Robert read the document slowly, too slowly. He didn't interrupt. He didn't react. He just turned each page, adjusted his glasses, and kept going. When he finally looked up, the room felt smaller. "This isn't a misunderstanding," he said. "This is fraud." The word landed cleanly. No drama, no exaggeration, just fact. He pulled out my father's trust agreement, the original version I'd skimmed years ago but never fully absorbed. Back then, it had felt like paperwork. Now, it felt like a blueprint. "There's a provision here," Robert said, tapping a paragraph halfway down the page. "Your father insisted on it." He read it aloud. Any beneficiary who engages in deception, coercion, forgery, or misuse of trust assets to the detriment of another beneficiary forfeits all rights to inheritance under this trust. No appeals, no discretion. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My father had seen this coming. Not the details, not the names, but the pattern. He'd built a legal tripwire into the trust, something silent and invisible until someone crossed it. He didn't leave me a weapon. He left me a shield. Nina leaned forward. "If we can prove intent," she said, "this clause doesn't just reverse the damage. It ends it." That's when we widened the scope. What started as a forged signature became a forensic review. Transaction logs, vendor contracts, payment schedules, and then something worse surfaced. A lien filing. My house at Cape Alder, the one place I still felt connected to my father, had been used as collateral. A fraudulent UCC lien, quietly filed, tying my property to a business obligation I had never agreed to. My name, my asset, someone else's plan. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. This wasn't about a wedding anymore. This wasn't entitlement or poor judgment or family conflict. This was premeditated, calculated. Someone had assumed I wouldn't notice, or if I did, that I'd hesitate long enough for the damage to become irreversible. "They didn't just reach into your trust," Robert said quietly. "They tried to anchor themselves to your future." That was the moment my grief turned into resolve. Robert moved fast, faster than I expected. Emergency filings, verified affidavits, evidence bundled cleanly and mercilessly. Nina drafted the motion while I sat there, answering questions, providing timestamps, confirming facts. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just momentum. Within hours, the request was filed. An emergency court order to freeze all assets connected to me. The trust, the house, any accounts linked directly or indirectly. No withdrawals, no transfers, no excuses. When the confirmation came through, Robert slid the document across the desk. "They can't touch anything now," he said. "Not legally." I stared at the page, my name printed at the top in stark black letters. Protected. I thought about Marjorie's voice on the phone. Calm, assured. Certain that everything could be smoothed over later. I wondered if she felt it yet, the shift, the moment when confidence gives way to uncertainty. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. This wasn't retaliation. It was containment. I wasn't tearing anything down. I was preventing further collapse. My father had designed the structure. I was simply following the load path. As I left the office, Seattle was darkening outside, the city lights blurring against low clouds. I took a breath, deeper than I had in days. They still didn't know what they'd triggered, but they were about to find out that some safeguards don't announce themselves until it's already too late. Silverwood Estate looked exactly like the kind of place where people believe nothing bad can happen. Long gravel drive, perfectly trimmed hedges, white chairs aligned in neat rows beneath tall trees just beginning to turn gold. The mountains in the distance were sharp and indifferent, as if they'd seen this kind of thing before and learned not to care. I arrived alone. I parked farther down the road than the other cars, away from the valet stand, away from the noise. I wasn't there to make an entrance. I was there to watch something collapse under its own weight. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. Music floated across the lawn, soft and optimistic. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, cameras flashed. Everyone was relaxed in the way people are when they believe the hardest part of life has already been paid for. Then everything stopped. At first, it was subtle. A pause in the music. A confused glance from one of the caterers. A man in a dark suit speaking quietly to the event coordinator, holding a folder pressed flat against his chest. Then another man appeared. And another. Badges. Papers. Calm voices that didn't match the setting. Within minutes, the sound system was shut down. Bartenders stopped pouring. The rental staff began unplugging equipment under direct instruction. Conversations turned into whispers, then into open confusion. I saw Harper first. She stood near the aisle, frozen, her face drained of color. She kept asking the same question over and over, her voice rising each time. "What's going on? Why are they stopping?" No one answered her. Marjorie moved faster. She always did. She pushed through the crowd, her smile already forming, sharp and defensive. "There must be some mistake," she said loudly. gesturing around as if the estate itself could vouch for her. "This is a private event." The man with the folder didn't raise his voice. "These services are being suspended due to a court-ordered asset freeze," he said. "Payment sources tied to this event are currently under restriction." The word court changed everything. I stepped forward then. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to be seen. Marjorie's eyes found me instantly. They narrowed, not with shock, but with calculation, as if she were already rewriting the story in her head, searching for a version where this wasn't happening. "You did this," she said, her voice low. "I responded," I corrected. The crowd went quiet. Not completely, but enough. People sensed they were no longer watching a wedding delay. They were witnessing something else, something private turning public. Harper looked between us, confused, terrified. "Mom?" she whispered. "What is she talking about?" Marjorie didn't answer her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "There are 3 options," I said, clearly, evenly. "You choose how this goes," she scoffed. "You can't threaten me here." "I'm not threatening you." I held up a document. Just 1 page, clean, official. "Option 1, I continued. "You return every dollar taken from my trust, sign a written acknowledgement of forgery, and this stops here." Her lips pressed together. "Option 2, I said. "You refuse, and this proceeds to court. Publicly, with evidence." A murmur rippled through the guests. "And option 3, I finished. "You speak directly to the judge overseeing the freeze today." Silence. For the first time since I'd known her, Marjorie hesitated. She glanced around. At the guests, at Harper, at the estate staff standing idle, watching. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was exposure. She leaned closer to me. "You're ruining her wedding." I met her gaze. "You did that the moment you forged my name." Her confidence cracked, not dramatically, but visibly, a fine fracture running straight through the composure she relied on. Harper started crying, quietly, shocked more than heartbroken. She had believed the story she'd been given. Now she was standing in the wreckage of it. Marjorie straightened. "We'll talk later," she said tightly. "There is no later," I replied. "There is only now." The man with the folder cleared his throat. "Ms. Lane," he said, "we'll need your decision." And as the wind picked up across the lawn, chairs creaking softly behind us, I realized something important. This wasn't a confrontation. It was an accounting, and every lie was about to be measured. Marjorie made her choice in front of everyone. Not loudly, not proudly, but with the kind of stiffness that comes when someone realizes the room has turned against them and there's no graceful way out. She didn't argue anymore. She didn't accuse. She simply nodded once, tight-lipped, and asked for the papers. The transfer was executed within the hour. Every dollar taken from my trust was returned. The acknowledgement was signed. Forgery, misrepresentation, unauthorized use of assets. Words she had spent weeks pretending didn't apply to her were now etched into a legal record that couldn't be smoothed over with charm or denial. By signing, she triggered the clause my father had written years ago, the one no one thought would ever be used, the one that stripped her of every remaining claim she had to his estate. She didn't look at me when it was done. The wedding went on. Not as planned, not as promised. No sweeping music, no effortless luxury, no illusion of perfection. Just a scaled-down ceremony paid for with personal funds, held together by stubbornness and embarrassment. I didn't stay to watch it. I didn't need to. I left Silverwood Estate while the guests were still whispering, while Harper sat numb and silent, while Marjorie stood rigid beside her, suddenly smaller than she'd ever seemed. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel guilty either. I felt finished. The drive back to Cape Alder was long and quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions. When I reached the house, the ocean air hit me immediately, sharp and familiar. I unlocked the door with the old brass key my father used to carry on his work ring. It was scratched, heavy, real. The house hadn't changed. Same creak in the floorboard near the stairs. Same window that never quite sealed right. Same smell of salt and wood and time. I set my bag down and stood there for a moment, letting the stillness settle around me. This was never about revenge. It was about preservation. My father didn't leave me money so I could win arguments. He left it so I wouldn't have to surrender my life piece by piece just to keep the peace. He understood something I didn't fully grasp until now. that boundaries aren't walls meant to punish others. They're foundations meant to protect what matters. I walked through the house slowly, touching the things we'd built together. The railing he insisted we reinforce. The beams he checked twice, even when the contractor said once was enough. He used to tell me that a structure only fails when someone ignores the warning signs long enough. Marjorie ignored them. I didn't. Standing there, looking out at the water as the sky began to darken, I realized something else too. Silence doesn't always mean compliance. Sometimes it means patience. Sometimes it means gathering proof. And sometimes it means waiting for the exact moment when the truth can no longer be dismissed. I didn't lose my family that day. I let go of a role I was never meant to play. If you've listened to this story from the beginning, I hope it reminded you of something important. Protecting yourself isn't cruelty. Saying no isn't betrayal. And truth, when it's backed by clarity and courage, has a way of standing firm no matter who tries to lean on it. And if you're listening to this during the holiday season, I want to wish you a peaceful, gentle Christmas, one where your boundaries are respected and your voice is heard. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. There are many other women's stories waiting to be told, and your support helps them find their way to people who need to hear them. Thank you for being here.